Welcome back, and now we move to things literary. The 2013 Nigeria Prize for Literature, which is a project of the Nigeria LNG. The final shortlist of 3 writers has been approved by the advisory board for the Nigeria Prize for Literature, sponsored by the NLNG. And it was announced following an initial shortlist of 11. And the shortlisted writers are Mr. Tade Ikpadeola for his work, The Sahara Testaments, Mr. Amun Nadi for his work, Through the Window of a Sand Castle, and Promise Ogochukwu for Wild Letters. To give us the details of this, great award, we have in the studio Dr. Kudo Eresia Eke, who's General Manager, External Relations at the NLNG.
Good morning. Good morning. Nice to be here.
Thank you for
very
joining
much.
us. We also have a member of the advisory board, Professor Ben Elube.
Good morning.
Good morning. And we have the pleasure of having with us in the studio 2 of the finalists, Mr. Tade Ikpadeola.
Good morning.
And Mr. Amun Nadi.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for coming. Promise Ogochukwu is not able to join us this morning, but we'll do well with 2 of the finalists here with us in the studio. Let me start with NLNG, whose whole idea this is. Tell us about this prize for literature and how it all started.
Well, the Nigeria Prize for Literature is getting into its 10th anniversary by next year. Yeah. And the main reason for it is to align with the vision of the company, which is to help build a better Nigeria. Now, there are different ways that we outlined to pursue in building this better Nigeria. One of those areas that we just needed to pay attention to was to the area of education. And the prize then was instituted to encourage the best, to encourage the finest, to encourage excellence in the area of literature. But not just in literature, we also have instituted a prize for science. So we also have the Nigeria Prize for Science, because we believe that you have to be an ambidexter, in a manner of speaking, to move or to build a nation from the arts and from the science area. And we picked what we thought were the queens of those areas: literature on one side and science on the other. So those were the main reasons why we thought that this needed to be put forward, so Nigerians could aspire to those prizes and by that move everybody in the direction of excellence. We are very gladdened to hear that people are beginning. It's affecting literature, it's affecting aspiration, it's affecting the way that Nigerians are looking at the works of art which they are creating.
Great Nigerian people, Ahmed Yerima, Professor Haito, Mabel Shegun, Professor Akachi Adimora Ezegbo, and people like that have won these awards before 2013. Now let me move to Prof. Can you please tell us how the advisory board and the panel of judges zeroed in on these 3 finalists?
Well,
what are the criteria, for instance?
Yes, some of the criteria are very general and visible. One is simply that the book has to have been published in the last 4 years and should be published in a qualitative way, in a way that is acceptable across the world, that every library would accept. NLNG shouldn't award the prize to a book that is not well put together. But the more important issue is what is inside the book. And if you're talking poetry, we're talking about the theme, and that's always relevant in any literary piece of work. There's always going to be a theme. What are you addressing? What's going on in your mind? And then we'll want to look at, I'm not a judge, remember, but I'm just telling you that the judges sat down, yes, and they thought, and we agreed with them. They're interested in.
So you had a panel of judges.
We have, and
they had a list of.
Yes, they sat down. They held a meeting. 3 of them, Professor Romanus Egudu, Professor Molara Ogundikwe, Dr. Abba, and they brought out the criteria that will guide their work, and they include the use of language. Now, this year, in order to further make the prize controversy-free, we decided that we should have an external consultant, somebody of international repute, somebody who can be an arbiter should the internal judges fail to have a consensus.
So who did you bring on?
We brought in Kofi Anyidoho from Ghana. He's a well-known poet, has won many awards. So, but we don't need to bring him in unless there is a controversy internally.
And there was none this time.
We don't know.
Oh, no. The work is not.
This is just a final list, short list of 3.
Okay.
Any of these 3 can win the prize as it is, because at the moment we don't know who it is. The judges haven't told us. They're going to tell us at the beginning of October.
Okay. Mr.
And just, I'm sorry, if when they tell us, if they're in agreement with each other, then it's fine.
Then Mr. Kofi sits in his country. Okay. Mr. Akwadiola, you are a lawyer.
Yes.
And you are in practice.
Yes.
I find it interesting that you actually have time to sit down and write a book. Not just a book of the quality that qualifies for this prize. Tell us how you balance that.
Thank you. It's said that writing is not an occupation. It's a preoccupation, especially when you're writing poetry. You can't help yourself. You just have to write. You use different faculties for court work. You use linear logic for presenting your cases in court. You use asymmetric logic to write poetry. So really it doesn't disturb each other. Yeah.
And you find the time to write?
Oh yes, you have to make the time.
Okay.
It doesn't come...
Because you enjoy it?
Because you enjoy it. It's something that gives you pleasure of the mind. So.
Interesting. And Mr. Amunadi, I'm told here that you write poetry without punctuation, capital letters, you publish without any personal data and name. How are we supposed to understand what you're writing when you don't punctuate it and you don't use capital letters and all that?
Well, now there's a little difference. My first 2 books, The Fire Within and Pilgrim's Passage, didn't have any punctuations at all. But there's a certain departure in Through the Window of a Sandcastle. Now there are a few commas. And they're all...
Few.
It's all philosophical for me, in the sense that life itself is endless.
It has no commas, has it?
It just goes on. It does have commas.
Until
it has its ups and downs, but there's no full stop.
There is when you die.
You don't die, do you?
Not really.
No one dies.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and for me, poetry is life. You know, there's a certain immortality to it. You know, and if you're endowed with this gift, and I believe what we call the muse actually is your chi, your God speaking to you. And if he does endow you with this, it means that you have a bit of him in you, and that itself does not die.
Wow. We're going philosophical now, but let me bring you to the book for which you are here, Through the Window of a Sand Castle.
Yeah.
Tell us about that book, if you will.
It's a book of poetry.
Oh, it's poetry. Right.
It's a congregation of all kinds of emotions.
Where do these emotions come from? What is it that goes through your mind that inspires the writing of some of these works?
I don't think any poet can put a finger on any emotion and say, this is what brings this. You know, sometimes it's triggered by experiences. Sometimes it's triggered by smell. Sometimes it's triggered by association.
To a large extent, those things can come.
Let me give you an example. I lost my father a few years ago, and just contemplating it triggered a number of poems. All right? You meet people. I came back into Nigeria from a long trip. I spoke with my wife, and it triggered, just the conversation triggered a poem. So it's a whole lot of stuff. I was in Barcelona for a few days. I'm just meeting people, even those in taxi cabs, in cabs. The conversations build a certain association and communion with this city. So it's a whole lot of things.
Okay, maybe we should ask the NLNG, because those words are kind of like
tongue twister.
I think I would prefer to just say Nigeria LNG. So, Dr. Reziake, now we've got two people who write poems, and even the third person nominated, he does quite a bit of poetry himself, Promise Ogochukwu.
Yeah.
Is there something about poetry, or should I be asking Prof? Because I just think there might be something in there, not novelists, rather than
Poets.
Yeah, Prof, maybe.
Yes, the reason that you have all of them as poets is that the prize rotates from prose to poetry to children's literature to drama.